Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have another fantastic and incredible episode for you guys. And so today we're going to be talking about the big news subject from yesterday, and that is going to be the German election results. Yesterday, the conservatives, the CDU, became the biggest winner of the parliamentary elections. They won nearly 29% of the vote, with the AfD winning 21% of the vote, which was a record result for the far right and nationalists, almost doubling their total, their highest total of about 12.5% a few years ago. So it was a big move for the AfD, and they increased their total from the EU parliamentary elections, where they got, I think it was about roughly 19%. It was under 20% in the EU parliamentary elections last year. So they are increasing support despite they're still the establishment maintaining a firewall against supporting the AfD and the public condemnations of the AfD and many other things. I mean, they are under state surveillance. The state considers many elements within it, such as its youth wing, as extremists, which opens them up to state persecution. Yet over a fifth of German voters support the AfD. Now, some people had a lot of takes on the results. One take is that 80% of Germans voted against the far right and nationalists. Thus, they embraced a multicultural future. That is not really the case. Because if you take the support for the AfD, the CDU, which CDU ran on a strong immigration message, not as strong as the AfD, but they were trying to take that immigration message from the nationalists and run on it. And Friedrich Merz is not Merkel. Merkel was the head of the CDU and was chancellor of a CDU-led government for many years. She was not from the left. She was not from the Social Democrats. She was from the CDU, the Christian Democrats. He is much more to the right than Merkel was. And Merkel has been very critical of his leadership. Merkel was condemned Merz for trying to ally with the AfD and the Bundestag to pass strong immigration restrictions. This was actually earlier this year. This wasn't even last year. This is very early last year. Merkel tried to curb it and kill that effort and was strongly critical of it. So he is much more right-wing than Merkel. He is still not as good as AfD on a lot of different matters, but he's much better than Merkel. And his message was like, we're going to take immigration seriously far more than the Social Democrats who are in control, far more than this left-wing coalition that's in power. We're going to take immigration seriously and do something about it. So that, combined, that's nearly 50%, roughly 50%. And when you add in the Sarah Wagenknecht, which is a idiosyncratic left-wing party led by a charismatic politician named Sarah Wagenknecht, who left Die Linke, which is the far left party that's a successor to the Communist Party that led the East Germany. She is, she has a lot of left-wing positions, but she's also takes immigration seriously. Now, they've always seen the BSV as a way to take votes away from the AfD. Rather than being like a true anti-regime force, it's more that it's stealing votes from the AfD, and it also presents a safer alternative for, say, the CDU to bring into a political coalition with than the AfD. It is funny, even though on a lot of issues, Wagenknecht would be very different from the CDU, and the AfD is actually classically liberal economically, or right-wing economically. Have a lot of similarities on economics as the CDU, and Sarah Wagenknecht is a traditional leftist on this matters. They would still prefer to work with her rather than the AfD, because the AfD is considered Nazi or Nazi tainted, and so they would still rather work with leftists. But she does take immigration seriously, and her party, a huge message of it is, we're going to restrict immigration. So taking all three party the results or the support for them, they got nearly 5%, but not enough to get into the Reichstag. So they were expected to get some seats, but it appears that they fell just short of the 5% threshold, so they're not going to get any seats. And when you combine that together, all their votes together, it's roughly 55% of Germans. So 55% of Germans voted for a party that promised immigration restriction. And they went to, and there's some other independent candidates and others who maybe could have been considered part of, that could have also been aligned with that. So it's the 80%, the meme of 80% of Germans voted against, nationalism and immigration restriction, and what the AfD is for, AfD is for, is completely bogus. It's complete bullshit. It's not quite the case. A lot of Germans still are skeptical. They agree a lot with what the AfD says and believes, but they are skittish about voting for them due to the massive war guilt they have, also the fears of extremism, and that's just too far to cast their vote for that Nazi-esque party, and they still want to keep the status quo. So a lot of those voters who, they would have otherwise agreed with the agenda, entirely with AfD's agenda, they fell for the media's lines that it's too extremist, so they voted for the CDU, or they voted for the BSV. And even some of them voted for the left-wing parties. Probably not any of the Green Party voters, but there's a lot of voters who are traditionally working class. They care about immigration, but due to, long time loyalty to the SPD, they vote for the socialists still. So I don't think and if you look at polling, it can go anywhere from 60% to 3/4 of Germans saying we need to restrict immigration. So I don't think it's a rejection of the AfD. It's just a sign of just that. It's more of a sign of progress, because in the past, these far right parties, nationalist parties, were kept below 5%, and they were widely condemned. Nobody would be caught dead voting for them. Now that you have 21%, that's a huge improvement and a huge sign of progress. And these things aren't made overnight. So more voters are open to it. And the fact that the CDU opened up the possibility of allying with the AfD on legislation, undermining that firewall they have against the far right, because they take it as a matter of their national identity, that they're not going to allow a far right nationalist party to take power. We're not going to allow 1933 happen again. But the fact that the CDU was willing to create alliance to pass immigration legislation, earlier this year, was a major victory for the AfD, and the firewall is crumbling. Now, it's almost just a matter of how much it is. And even the speech about Vance that he gave, was like saying like the U.S. would be open to this, which in the past the U.S. would have been, if a German party, center-right party, was open to working with a far-right party, it'd be likely that our German ambassador would be telling them not to do this. And even Rick Grenell was very anti-AfD, and he was German ambassador under the first Trump term. But he doesn't matter as much. He's not shaping foreign policy anymore. Vance, Rubio, these guys are, and they're much more pro-AfD than anyone in the past, or anyone in the past would have treated the far right in Germany. So there's a lot of improvement there. And so just some quick points I want to make about German voters and what this means, and so like people getting upset about this, because there is even liberals saying, I was seeing articles about like 80% of Germans voted against fascism. Can this happen in America? Because they're like, over a majority of Americans voted for fascism here, which isn't quite the case. I have to repeat these points that I've been making over the last few weeks when people have asked me the difference between Europe and America and the pros and cons. And I think with the thing to consider about the AfD voters is that pretty much all of them get it. You're not voting for the AfD because of a Peanut the Squirrel meme video, which we're going to talk about later. And a kind of elite member sent a question about this. They're not voting for this due to lower taxes. They like the business. They do like their economic agenda, which is, which would lower taxes and regulations. I mean, taxes and regulations really do cripple business and people's ability to start businesses and economically thrive. And then it just rewards like unions and laziness and pensioners and other things. But the primary reason is immigration. It is to keep Germany German. That is the primary motivation of their voters. And that is probably what the majority of AfD voters believe, and it's also what probably a significant number of CDU voters believe as well. And so, when you see those numbers of who's voting for them, I would say at least a third of Germans get it, of what ideas we associate with the dissident right, and also keeping a country. Protecting and preserving a country's core population, I would say at least a third of German voters get it. Compared to America, even with Trump voters, I don't think even a third of Trump voters get it. They are strongly anti-illegal immigration. And a lot of them are more open to restricting immigration overall. I mean, you could see this in polls. In the late 2010s, it was the first time that more Americans wanted immigration increase than decrease. Sometimes the majority opinion is to keep it at the status quo. Sometimes it is decreased. Rarely is increased higher than decreasing immigration. But it happened as a part of a backlash against Trump. Now, the plurality opinion is to restrict immigration, legal immigration overall. But I don't think it's about keeping American, because unless you're really online, this is a concept that flies over a lot of people's heads. I mean, some people intrinsically get it, or maybe get it on an instinctual level. When they go to a mall and they're like the only white person there, they will be like, I feel like a stranger in my own land, but it's not really well articulated. Why do Germans? It's very, very clear, and there's a very clear sense of group identity among Germans when there is, even among the core population of heritage Americans, there's not as a strong of a group identity. They're clear about it. So that gives Germans an advantage, or Europeans an advantage. Second is that Europe has a much better different demographic situation. Germany is well over 80% white. And it is that is changing, but they still are over 80% white. And here at most 55% white, excluding some of the, as I made this point in a previous podcast, that includes the white category, which is over 57%, includes Middle Eastern and North Africans. And a lot of them don't consider themselves white. They consider themselves something else. So, better demographic situation. But the real difference, the advantages for America is that America is a real power. It can exert itself. It can do what it wants. As we can see with Trump. Trump can threaten all these third world countries to take migrants, and the third world countries have to take it. Meanwhile, France is currently impotently trying to have a visa war with Algeria, and the Algerians won't take it. And they just had a recent terror attack last week, and this guy, they've been trying to deport him to Algeria, and Algeria had rejected him 10 times. And so that doesn't happen with America. America is capable of exerting itself and doing things in a way that Europe isn't, because every European country is in the EU, and the EU operates as a homeowners association for a retirement community. Even worse, it's a retirement community HOA, not just even a normal HOA. And they're all just bickering, and really what happens is stasis, and everyone supports the status quo. And even though the status quo is bad, they can't come to agreement for any radical change or reforms. And so while America, thanks to our system and just the one president, energetic president, can affect a lot of change in a way that Europeans wish they could. Because Europeans, they're limited in what they can do domestically due to the EU, and the EU itself is just incapable of doing radical change. So we have a much better political system, and we're a real power, unlike Europe at the moment. So but that can change. I think if you had an EU dominated by or led by an AfD led Germany and a National Rally led France, you would have a different order. Maybe the EU could die out and some other type of alliance or federation could emerge that's much better than what the EU is at the moment. But they do have those issues. So I think but overall, I think it's a positive. Some people I even saw right wingers who were taking the left wing line and being blackpilled. I'm like, why the hell are you blackpilled? It's like, it would have been unthinkable for a party, for the AfD to win over 20%. And they continue to get this support despite all the government backlash towards them and the media backlash towards them. I mean, the media hates the AfD in Germany and otherwise. And also, I think some of the Germans are skittish also about the AfD fully supporting J.D. Vance. I think maybe J.D. Vance's intervention in the election may have dampened the AfD support by a little bit, maybe by a percentage point. Maybe it could have been 22% rather than 21%, or maybe even 23%. I think Germans didn't, they're worried that the Elon Musk and JD Vance interventions are not as popular in Germany as as we might think, because they think this is like foreign actors swaying their elections, and they don't really quite like that very much. And it's also impacting how they view the United States, which we'll go to the first Kadalev elite question today, because I got it about this topic. And it's about AfD being anti-American. Now, the person who asked this question sent it in German to test my German knowledge, but I am not going to read it in German. I'm going to read it in English, because people already complain that when I'm reading questions, they're halting or something. So I am just going to read it as in English. So this comes from IPA Enjoyer. He says, is the AfD against America? The Wall Street Journal implies it is. He claims I know the party better than he does. So what do I think? And if they gain power, would this help Russia and China? And Wall Street Journal had this article, which was from a guy from Die Bild, which is the closest thing to a right-wing media empire. It's part of the Axel Springer media empire, which Springer was kind of like the German Rupert Murdoch. He's been dead for 40 years now, but the company he founded is behind most of their center-right publications. And Bild, I was calling it D-Bild, but it's just Bild. Bild, B-I-L-D, is their, like the New York Post. It's more like New York Post rather than Wall Street Journal. I think they do have, I'm not sure they do have a Wall Street Journal equivalent in Germany, but I'm not sure if it's owned by the Springer media empire. But anyway, this was a writer for a Bild, who was writing for an American audience, saying about how anti-American they are. And he's talking about, the AfD is making inroads with Elon Musk and Vance and Trump world, but you gotta work. They think America isn't Germany's ally. They think that Germany is a slave to America, and that they want to free themselves from American influence and declare independence from America. And thus, MAGA should not be pro-AfD. There's a funny line in there. I'll read this paragraph. And they talk about podcasters saying, like, the idea of race, or what they said, the concept of family, nation, and community held by figures like Elon Musk is utterly incompatible with ours. And they cite Musk's private life, the names of his children, and his family's ethnicity, concluding that he can never be an ally, but they can, temporary alignments of interest can help them forward. Which, as I go, it is about, like, they get it, and MAGA doesn't quite get it, but MAGA still promotes good things. So here's the key paragraph here. Superficial parallels exist between the Republican Party and the AfD, largely shaped by media. But the AfD isn't Germany's equivalent of MAGA. It's becoming a German race-first party. Its ideologues fantasize about a rebirth of an ethnically pure German Volk. It is no coincidence that Mr. Höcke, Bjorn Höcke, who is their strongest leader, they've tried to kick him out. Hopefully, he becomes the full leader of the party, but there's moderate elements who oppose him. Anyway, Mr. Höcke lamented the portrayal of Hitler as absolutely evil, or that Maximilian Krah, who is another prominent leader in the AfD. He says the party's lead candidate for the EU elections publicly declared that not all members of the SS, Hitler's elite killing troops, should automatically be considered criminals. So it's like, these guys are pro-Nazi, pro-Hitler. You MAGA boomers, you don't like that, do you? So you should support the CDU. So the point is saying that the AfD is anti-American. But I think as you really need a lot of people don't like Alyssa Vidal, who's their leader or the co-leader that they have, but her interview with the American Conservative is very good. I think you guys should read it. And I think this is the op-ed he was referring to. It might have been an op-ed she wrote for German media, but she also reiterated these points about how they're operating as a vassal state for America. They don't have true power, true sovereignty. They are effectively a slave to America. And she cited how Germany reacted to America, which likely blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which is a major source of energy for Germany. And then they just said, well, they didn't say a word about it. And it's like, America, ostensibly Germany's ally, can just blow up their energy pipeline and punish their vassal state just to ensure that they are disconnected from Russia. And also they cite a lot of AfD leaders and commentators and others who have wanted an alliance with Moscow. And so what would be this like? I think there is going to be a convergence or from what a American imperial policy would be, even under maybe Republicans, and what a European independence would look like. The thing is Europe lives at the mercy of America. And whoever's in office dictates policy. Right now, they have someone in office who supports nationalist parties or right-wing parties. This wasn't the case under Biden. Biden, you have to remember, Meloni is like the most loyal American ally in Europe. And Biden condemned her election, openly condemned her election. And that was sending a signal that the administration does not like Meloni and would prefer someone else. And she was more pro-American. I mean, this was even the case in Brazil, where the administration backed Lula against Bolsonaro, even though Bolsonaro was much more pro-American, while Lula is very pro-Russia and China. But the fact is that there's this idea that they had to be opposed to international MAGA, so they hated Bolsonaro, so they backed Lula, who is anti-American and pro-China, while Bolsonaro is pro-America, anti-China. Very stupid policy, but, the idiotic women running our foreign policy and others thought it was Biden policy, thought it was a brilliant idea. So they have to live at whoever's in control of America. And they saw what happened under Biden, where they're forcing Europe to destroy its economies and send every piece of military equipment to Ukraine and, blowing up their energy supply. Not in their interest. And now they see with Trump, Trump is placing tariffs on them and demanding even more, concessions to America, and they are living at the behest of America. And so an American foreign policy has long been trying to prevent a Paris, Berlin, Moscow axis. That is a very important part of American foreign policy to prevent. They do not want a Europe that is closely tied with Russia. Now, there are issues with that being created, namely Eastern Europe. Poland and the Baltic states are very hostile towards this idea. And also Scandinavia, and a lot of Scandinavian countries as well, Sweden and Finland in particular. They do not want that. So that's kind of America's bulwark against it. But Paris, Germany, France, Italy may just do something on their own to build that alliance, or Western Europe. And that is absolutely something America doesn't want to have. But that would grant Europe a lot more independence and freedom of action away from America. Now, a lot of these nationalist parties and right-wing parties have this as a difference. I've always said that a good metric is where they stand on Russia and how much you can trust them. If they are sympathetic to Russia and open to working with them, they probably are more likely to do things, or you can trust them more. For a European perspective, this might not be in America's interest, but for Europeans as getting things done. If they are extremely anti-Russia, like Meloni, you have to be more skeptical of them. Now, Meloni is actually, even though despite her horrible first year, she has gotten a lot better. She's also been the leader on trying to restrict immigration in Europe alongside Orban. Like, probably no one besides Orban is doing more than her to try to prevent this from happening. Yet, she's still, there's still a lot of skepticism that you have for her. And AfD and the National Rally in France are both have a much more sympathetic line towards Russia than a lot of other right-wing parties. I mean, the center right in Germany is very anti-Russia now, which is actually another difference between them and Merkel. Merkel actually had a more pro-Russia line than a lot of their current leaders, but Merz and the left are also much more anti-Russia now. I mean, even the Social Democrats were actually fairly pro-Russia because, I mean, it's a very much critical element to their economy, but they've all veered sharply anti-Russia, leaving just the BSV and AfD, and I guess Die Linke. Die Linke actually had a surprisingly good election results, which everyone thought that they were on their way out, but they actually did pretty well. They actually got the most in Berlin, and they're a very goofy party. I'm pretty sure Die Linke also has a much friendlier, is much more open to working with Russia. And a lot. But it's also the center right in France is very anti-Russia. The Tories are insanely anti-Russia in Britain. And so that's like the case where it comes down to. I don't know if it's anti-America, but I just think it's a natural result of being a European nationalist and seeing what happens if you're totally under the control of America, which is this. And I think it's natural for nationalists to want to have their own independence and sovereignty. And if they view themselves as vassal states to America, it's not a good thing. So I think it's a natural reaction towards them. And I think it would be better overall if Europe was more independent and more capable of taking care of itself. The only thing is a lot of... I'm skeptical it could happen in the way we would want to, because there's a lot of talk now about a European united army, or Europeans getting hard power to match its soft power. The thing is, it could be an extremely cringe it still would be a very cringe European Union that's not as base European a union as we imagine, and their sole goal is fighting Russia and sending every piece of military equipment they have to Ukraine. But in that case, America would be paying the bill for Europe, so they could just take care of things on their own. It would still be to our benefit. I think it's we pay for a lot to keep troops there and to maintain this. In Europe, it would be better if they picked up the slack and we could direct our resources elsewhere. And it'd be better for Europe too. So I generally think it's a good thing, and hopefully this shocks them out of their complacency. And even with Merz, who, he's very strong. We need to support Ukraine no matter what. He gave a speech, he's like, we need to have independence of the U.S. because we can't trust the current administration. Now, the reasons why are for cringe reasons, is like they intervened in our elections and told people to vote for AfD, and they're not supporting Ukraine enough. We've got to maintain it. We've got to get independence. But no matter the reasoning, I think Europe getting greater independence, realizing that they have to build up their own militaries and do things on their own without relying on America, is a good thing, both for America and Europe. So hopefully this leads it to that result. So we're going to move on to some other questions. We've got one from Ken. It's about Elon, so we'll bring in that. He said, I've got another question. Am I the only one who's starting to find Elon really grating? He's doing good stuff, and I think we're all grateful for what he's done, but I see more about him nowadays than Trump, although that might just be because he owns Twitter. Doge is great, but I was hoping for more deportations. We're waiting for the reconciliation bill, I know, and less Reddit humor. On that note, does the base love him and his humor? Does the base eat up Kekius Maximus the way they do Peanut the Squirrel? The thing about Elon is that he is very beneficial to us. He is a net benefit for us. I mean, having free speech on X is sufficient to like Elon. We should be grateful for Elon. Also, a lot of what he's doing in the government is good. The only problem I have with it is that I think it might prompt a backlash because they might accidentally cut Social Security for a lot of seniors and do some other things that create some economic uncertainty, and then that will hurt Trump. But he is going, they're trying to find like DEI everywhere it could be found and some other things, but they may be going a little bit overboard than what the public would allow, and that could hinder Trump's ability to do the things we want, like deportations. So that's my opinion on Elon. Elon, I want to get that out of the way. I am pro Elon. I think he is certainly benefiting us. We should be grateful for Elon. At the same time, Elon is cringe. Elon is profoundly unfunny. The thing about Elon is Elon's main goal in life is to be seen as hilarious. He is extremely unfunny. And the worst type of people are, I wouldn't say the worst type of people, but the way you become extremely unfunny is if you're a person who thinks they're funny and then they try desperately to be funny. I've known a lot of people like this, and it always sucks. And even his like thing at CPAC where, I don't know, he's dressed like a meme, like gangster style, and he's wielding a chainsaw that Milei gave him, and you're like, what the hell is this? Like, dude, come on. We're very appreciative of what you're doing with X and the government, but please stop forcing us to think you're funny. Which a part of the Elon cult, there's two things that we have to believe. We have to believe he's extremely funny, which he's not. He's very unfunny. It's very Reddit humor. He is very Reddit, personality-wise. Which goes to show is like a lot of these guys are like Interax who thought the neo-reactionaries and stuff. They're like, we need to red pill the tech guys because then they'll promote a better right that's more aesthetic and more intelligent. And then like Elon is now relying on Cat Turd to tell him about it, and he's like full into like the lamest elements of MAGA, but it's also merged with Reddit, which makes it cringe. I mean, the thing is like Trump has like a lot of boomer elements, but Trump is just hilarious. He doesn't even try to be funny, and he'll just be funny. And like the personality cult of him is, if even like a lot of people who are dismissive of him, of like a lot of things they do, they have to admit he's funny, and you just naturally love Trump. I like the personality cult around Trump. I don't like the one around Elon, because first is like we have to pretend he's extremely funny and laugh at his lame ass jokes. They're not funny. He is very unintentionally funny. I will give him that. The second is we have to pretend he's like the father of the century, which, all his baby mamas are now like suing him, being like, hello, please take care of your kids. And it appears he only takes care of one of his kids, and his kid's name's X. Like, and apparently he doesn't even take, there was like some video of him wandering off stage and leaving X behind. But everyone, all the like content farmers have to be like, this is we need more fathers like this. I was like, well, that's on one way kind of funny, kind of keyed, but, just like a man who fathers all these kids and then doesn't take care of them. But actually, I don't think that's keyed. But I just think it's really funny how those two elements, we have to like praise him as father of the year, father of the century, really. And he's really funny. I think if we just had to respect him as a great businessman who's getting a lot of things and is doing a lot of good, it'd be much better. I think but it gets grading. But we are the ones who get more grading because we're extremely online, so we have to experience this all the time. But then a lot of times Elon makes up for it by highlighting like, migrant crime and Europe or Great Replacement or something else. I mean, there is, the H-1B stuff that you have to worry about. He hasn't pushed that yet. And it seemed like that was more of a Vivek thing. So far, so good on that matter. But the personality cult around him, besides the personality cult, I'm pro Elon. I'm just not really a fan of the personality cult. At the same time, does the base like him? Yes, they do. The average Fox News viewer thinks he's awesome. They don't like him as much as Trump. It's more of a Twitter phenomenon where they like him, and they don't get Kekius Maximus. Like a lot of the stuff like Harry Bowles and Kekius Maximus, they don't get. But Elon is second to Trump in the memes and t-shirts. I mean, if you walk around in like very MAGA places, or there's this grocery store in Naples, Florida, Seed to Table, which I once went to, and they have tons of Elon merch there, tons of Elon merch alongside Trump merch, and he's becoming more popular. I mean, if you look at a lot of, there was even like wandering around the city during inauguration, there was a lot of people wearing shirts with like Trump Elon stuff, and so he is, in terms of of personalities they like, Elon is second, but he is a very firm second. He is not competing for first with Trump among the base. It's only on Twitter where his personality cult is outsizing Trump, because he's posting all the time. Meanwhile, Trump doesn't post to Twitter, and also the website is built around Elon, whether criticizing him or talking about what he's doing. And it's a very different from the first admin where everything was on Trump. And even the media is trying to lessen his influence by saying, "Oh, it's President Musk." But I think Trump is fine with that, because Trump realizes that Trump has higher approval rating and probably better standing of the public by being a figurehead rather than being seen as the man actually doing things. You know, it's almost like Elon's the prime minister and Trump is the ceremonial head of state, and the people, if Elon goes wrong, they can turn to the head of state, be like, get rid of Elon and make things right. And Trump, I think, is wisely doing that right now and just letting Elon take all the heat and lowering approval ratings. And so I think that's smart on Trump's part, but he can't let it get too overboard, because eventually the blame will be assigned to him. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Elon, still net benefit, still a very good thing for us. I just think on X we need to tone down the personality cult because it's a little strange. We got Renown. He asked a question just about what I think about Ukraine and Trump's moves to making peace there. He didn't really formulate it as a question. The only question is if you want to comment on how giving cold shoulder to Ukraine will affect Trump's popularity in polling. It is too early to say what's going to happen in Ukraine. I mean, it is more, Trump's, what he's indicating is more than I expected from Trump on this. But I think he's able to do this because the public doesn't give a shit about Ukraine. Public absolutely doesn't give a shit. If this was 2022, it would have been unpopular. Today, they're like, why are we still giving billions to Ukraine? We don't give a shit about this matter. It's just a very elite concern at this moment that the general public does not care about. And they're trying to rile up the public like, we're abandoning democracy in Ukraine. Nobody cares. No, American public doesn't care anymore. They would have cared, like I said, in 2022. They don't care anymore. It's a long time for them to care about this war, and they don't like us spending billions on a foreign country. So Trump I don't think it's going to boost his popularity. I just think it's not going to affect it at all. And what he gives Russia, I mean, he's just going to make the peace deal we should have made in 2022. It's like, we're going to see territory. NATO, Ukraine won't be in NATO. It's the deal they have to take. It is what it is. It is funny he's ripping into Zelensky. The funny thing is, like, Zelensky is the most moderate person they could get for that role, because everyone else who would take over from Zelensky is even more devoted to the war than Zelensky. So that is like one funny thing, but it is like hilarious where they're like, Trump's attacking Zelensky. This is going to really hurt his polling. It's like, no one cares about Zelensky anymore. And they're also tired of this guy getting billions of dollars from us. And, there's no end in sight to this war. And they also don't like this guy lecturing America's president. This isn't the 2010s where they would find any foreign leader who criticizes Trump and then turn them into hero. I mean, there was at one point where they turned Kim Jong-un's sister into slay queen moment because she gave side eye to Trump. And that was one point where they're like, okay, that's too far. But anyone who criticized Trump abroad, like the national media would celebrate as a hero. Like, we need this person as president. Now that's no longer the case, and Zelensky is dealing with a different environment. So, and it's also following the fact that a lot of libtard resistance people are elevating his clips and being like, Zelensky's awesome, he's owning Trump. And then, That's not how you win over American support now. Very different from like 2018. So that's my thoughts on that. I think we got some. Let's see, who else? Some of these are more inside baseball, so I'm trying to get the main topics of going on. I'll go with Dollar Bill. Dollar Bill has he's got two questions. He's got his first question is a big one. He's asking, who do you think deserves the ignominious title of worst American of all time? Some contenders: Benedict Arnold, whose name centuries later is synonymous with being a traitor. There's Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who leaked American nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union. There's also, of course, George Floyd, a drug addict and all-around scumbag whose life and legacy was possibly the biggest net negative to the country. Those are just the candidates who immediately spring to mind. I'm sure you can draw on your knowledge of history to name others. Who is the worst American of all time? It would be on qualities. I mean, there's be a lot of names for that. With the Rosenbergs, the one who leaked the most was Klaus Fuchs, who I don't think even was an American citizen. He was German, who was working one of these German scientists who fled from Nazi Germany. And for those asking, he was a Gentile. I know people are going to be asking, it's like, oh, is he really German? No, he's the son of a Lutheran pastor. He was just a communist. We shouldn't have let him in. He was left because he's a leftist, and we were paid the price for letting him into our country. But they're still bad. I'm not saying that they're not. This is not diminishing what they did, but I would say that there's worse people in that regard. Benedict Arnold, I think, is more of a tragic figure, but in terms of what he did, it could have ended the American Revolution. You know, if his treason had come off the way it had been intended, it could have ended the American Revolution and we would have stayed a British colony. So I think he would deserve the worst American for that regard, even though I think of him as not as much of a villain, because there was reason. I mean, he was not getting the rewards that he deserved. He was one of the better military commanders we had, and he was passed over and not getting the compensation he needed, and then he got convinced by his new wife to betray America, but he'd be one of them. There's a lot of others. I think Aaron Burr, this might offend Burr heads, but Burr was also really bad American because he also tried to do treason and side and split off parts of America with the aid of Spanish. Some people always deny, like, no, he never tried to do that. He always had these conspiracies afoot. Probably not as bad as Benedict Arnold and what it could have done to America. I think in terms of public figures that we're going to have to venerate, George Floyd, if he does go down in history as somebody like live your life like George Floyd, just by quality of person. I mean, because like Benedict Arnold at the end of the day, even though he did what was the worst thing that could have happened in this country's history and nearly ended America existing as a country, he is a first worst quality of person than Benedict Arnold. Okay, like Benedict Arnold, there was understandable reasons for his treason. Still not defensible. I'm just saying there's understandable. George Floyd was a complete piece of shit that we're now going to have to revere. But we might, like, I think over time, as we move on, they're going to be, like, embarrassed by George Floyd. And they're not going to try to turn him into, like, the next Emmett Till. We'll have to see. If in 10 years from now, like, textbooks are teaching him like he's Emmett Till, then I would say, just by quality of person and, like, how pathetic it is that we're revering him, he would count as the worst American. I still think there's a lot of noble qualities in Benedict Arnold. There are zero noble qualities in George Floyd. Benedict Arnold was also a better person than Aaron Burr. There could be a lot of others, but I think their treason and their act that Benedict Arnold did had the capacity to end America. And for that alone, you would have to say he's the worst American of all time. Very few others had an act that could have just ended America. And he's got one more question. Can you comment on Democrat copium dealer James Carfield's bold prediction that the GOP is just 4 to 6 ways from imploding? Where it's not going to implode from 4 to 6 weeks. I think there is something to worry about, is that the honeymoon period is coming to an end and that there could be significant levels of public backlash towards what Republicans are doing. And I think there is a potential that there is an eternal rift within the party over the reconciliation bill, which we're going to get to at the next question. If the Republicans can't pass the reconciliation bill and it just creates, and like House Freedom Caucus prevents it from happening, it would be House Freedom Caucus prevents it from happening. There is going to be hell to pay. Also, there could be public backlash because the one bill, there's two ideas they have for reconciliation. Senate wants to do two bills, House wants to do one bill. Senate wants to do a bill that's just for border funding and like things that are very uncontroversial, and then they push them through. The second bill would be trying to cut government spending and other things, which is obviously probably not going to pass because it also calls for cuts to entitlements, which would be very unpopular. House Republicans, knowing that if they do a two-bill process, that the second bill is probably not going to get passed, wants to combine both bills to ensure greater chances of passage for the second set. And Trump has endorsed it. I'll go into my thoughts on this in the next question. But if this fails to pass, if they can't get a reconciliation bill through, I do think it's like saying like the honeymoon is over and the Republicans are going to have big problems. That's also going to hinder Trump's ability to, deport more illegals and other things. I don't know if it's imploding, but there is a strong potential for a public backlash, and then it comes out into the midterms where Republicans get slaughtered there. And if the economy gets shaky, if they're not able to affect a lot of these legislative priorities, if they just seem like they can't pass anything, and then Elon is dictator of the country, and then Americans really don't like that, and then the country doesn't really fall in love with him firing all these bureaucrats and other things. I mean, there's already starting to build this resistance towards Elon. The fact that, they issued this directive is like every government staffer has to say what they did this week or they're going to be fired. First off, civil service protections is never going to allow that. And most agencies are telling their staffers to ignore it. And there's nothing Elon can do about that. I mean, they're trying to eliminate the government, which I think is a good thing, or a lot of it, but they're going to be limited by the law in what they want to do. And that's why they keep losing in court over this. But so far, the public doesn't, they don't really like government bureaucrats, but over time, this could, determine whether they like the President Elon and other things. So, 4 to 6 weeks, it just depends on what you mean by imploding. I think they can't implode enough because all of these lawmakers fear Trump and Elon in a way they didn't in the first term. In the first term, every single backbencher would try to be like, I disagree with Trump, or I don't really like this about Trump, or they would be happy to tell reporters about how much they hate Trump on background, not with their name. And there was all these guys, Ben Sass and others, who would just make a huge name about like standing up against Trump. And the media would fall in love with them and other things. Now every Republican realizes that if Trump hates them, they're going to lose their seat. Back then, they were like, Trump's going to back me in my primary, doesn't matter. And unfortunately, he usually did, because there was no one serious running against them, or, whatever. He was told by Mitch McConnell, who was running the presidency, or was determining the presidency at that time, was saying, okay, you got to back this guy. Now, if he feels these people as disloyal, he might back a challenger. And seeing the track record in the 2022 primaries, they have a very good chance of winning. And also, if Elon sends his money there and uses X as a platform to elevate that guy and denigrate the incumbent, they're very much terrified of Trump and Elon in a way that they were not in 2017 or 2018. So that's going to prevent the party from imploding, and I think that's also a thing that might help the reconciliation bills pass. But I need to get into that question from New England Refugee, who asks, are you for 2 reconciliation bills or 1? The Senate wants 1 and the House wants 2. You got that backward. I want 1 because it would be easier to get through, even though there will be more bad stuff Democrats like. We need to get it through to fund the border, deportations, and other priorities. What are your thoughts? Yeah, the Senate wants two and the House wants one. Because as I went over, the Senate wants two because they can pass the border funding and other things that are popular and uncontroversial, and then they can. The second bill will probably not pass, and that'll probably be good for Republicans since they don't want to be known for cutting entitlements and other things. So, from a political matter, I'm for whatever can get passed. I think if the two bills makes more sense politically, but House Freedom Caucus might stop it. And the fact is Trump's been won over to the one bill idea. So Trump is not going to use his power and sway to force the House to back to back a solely border funding bill. He's going to want to use his power and sway to fund a one bill. Now the issue is that House Freedom Caucus isn't very happy with the one bill. They want even more things in it, which the Senate realizes it's unpopular to put even more. It's already unpopular to do one bill. They absolutely don't want to add more to it. So I'm for whatever can get passed. I think the fact is Trump has made his mind up on being the one bill. Sure, we'll get that passed. I think it might get amended to take out some of the things that it's going to be harder to pass in the Senate. But for right now, that's the best chance of passage because that's what he's going to be advocating for. As I said, Republicans are scared of him and Elon right now, and they don't want to run afoul of them. And the Republicans who would be most likely to oppose it have elections coming up like Tillis, Cornyn, a few others, and they're going to back it just to ensure their political future. So, yeah, I'd say the one bill. The one problem that you could say the one bill, well, they're not going to get Democrat stuff in. It's all about winning over Republicans because the reconciliation bills, you just need a simple majority to pass them. If they're considered budget reconciliation bills and it matters to the budgets, they're not vulnerable to filibusters. You just need a simple majority to pass. Now, you do have to worry about the Senate parliamentarian saying whether this meets the guidelines for what a budget reconciliation bill is. Because Democrats tried to pass amnesty through budget reconciliation in 2021, and the Senate parliamentarian is like, you can't do this. And also, oh man, I'm forgetting the two moderates in there, Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, who both are gone now, were already not wanting to go along with the reconciliation bill, but then the Senate parliamentarian saying like, yeah, you can't do this. They didn't have a majority to pass them. So in the Senate. So with the reconciliation bills, they just need to win over Republican support, and likely with the House, it's going to be keeping House Freedom Caucus on board. Now, there could be a few moderates who don't like the entitlement cuts, but I think that they're going to be so afraid of Trump and Elon that they'll back it anyway. It's more like Massey, who feels that he doesn't need to fear Trump, that he might just vote. He might be the one guy who kills this whole process just to spite Trump. I don't know. We'll see. But I do worry that they can't pass this reconciliation bill, that this is going to generate an idea that like the gears are stopping and they're not going to get much more progress with this administration. And we're also gearing up for, using gears a lot here, we're gearing up for a really bad midterm in 2026. But so far, so good. No reason to be black-pilled or pessimistic. We'll see how things turn out. I think with the new dynamic of these guys being afraid of Trump, the fact is that they try to have a revolt against Mike Johnson. I was about to call him Kevin Johnson, combining Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson. I don't like Mike Johnson, but the fact is Trump got and intimidated Republican House members to vote for Mike Johnson, which is a good sign for the reconciliation bill, is that these guys do not want to run afoul of Trump and Elon, because they're going to get primaried. And I think the House Freedom Caucus, they're going to, talk a big game and do this, but when push comes to shove, they're going to be voting for whatever's before them. And so will moderates as well. And if they get that reconciliation bill through the House, the Senate will pass it. They might amend it, whatever. As long as we get border funding, that's really what all I care about. It's going to be a victory. It'll be a big win for Trump, and I think we can be optimistic about the administration going forward. But I feel if they can't get it through this year, I mean, they're going to have a lot of attempts this year. So it might fail in the spring, but maybe they have another opportunity in the summer or fall. As long as they get past this year, we can be optimistic. If they do not get it past this year, it's not a good sign. They'll still do a lot of good things with the administration, but I think it's not a good omen. Now we're going to Appalachian. Appalachian asks, what is your stance on the Patriot Act, FISA, and NSA being able to spy on American citizens for a week without a warrant? I am opposed. I do not like it. There's no real need for it anymore. We should change. We should get rid of it. I don't think it's enlarging these unelected bureaucrats to spy on us and without any say over the matter or the people say is not a good thing. We did this in the war on terror, and they haven't really defended the position as it's necessary against terrorism. And anyway, whenever there's these terrorists, they're on the FBI watch list, and then they're like, "Oh shit, we forgot to notice him." So I don't really like it. If they're not citizens, I don't give a shit. But on American citizens, I don't really like that idea. Second, when are the Never Trump Republicans going to die? Bill Kristol, Tim Miller, etc. need to realize the Republican Party is not going back. Hopefully, please reassure me that it's not going back to its pre-Trump form. It is not going back to its pre-Trump form. Trump has made forever change the Republican Party. Really, with the bulwark Republicans, those Never Trumpers, they've all just gone straight Democrat. They still have an audience. The thing is that they still have an audience because I don't know if I went over this last week. Maybe I did on my the mailbag. But the thing about this is that on X, like the Trump MAGA base is like full effect, full power. But on Substack, Never Trumpers are huge. Like the Bulwark, the Dispatch, and a lot of these IDW types who are anti-Trump but centrist or anti-woke, they have huge audiences on Substack. So it's a lot of people who are like, wow. Well, even with Richard Hanania, who I guess isn't really Never Trumper, but he's like his own thing, never consistent. Put that. He is huge. He's got a huge audience on Substack. I mean, he's got a lot of paid subscribers. Meanwhile, everyone dunks on him and hates on him on X. So, one platform might be different, but I think it's just there is this type of Wall Street Journal Republican who's still around, who's still like skittish about Trump, and he's still reading some of these guys. I don't think he's reading Bulwark because Bulwark is like insanely anti-Trump. They're more reading Dispatch, which is moderately anti-Trump. And they have big platforms, they do. And even I think Tim Miller's having, his podcast is that he does with the Bulwark is like a big podcast on YouTube and elsewhere. So they have a large audience, but it's an audience that is not influencing the Republican Party. They no longer have the ear of the people who make policy within the Republican Party. They have been They have been pushed out. They have the ears of moderate Democrats and centrists who may have voted for Trump or may have voted for no one or reluctantly voted for Kamala in 2024, and they listen to Bill Kristol and Tim Miller. Now, this is a very niche audience, as these are people or news junkies who who have the time to read a lot of Substack. And Substack is a very centrist platform. Even though I'm on Substack, the dissident right or whatever, New Right has not really established itself on Substack in the way that Never Trumpers and enlightened centrists and others have, who like predominate on the platform. So they're still going to have a huge audience. You're still going to have to realize who they are, but they have just no influence over Republicans anymore. And the Republican Party is not going back to its pre-Trump form. It is forever shaped by Trump. In the same way that Ronald Reagan forever shaped the Republican Party in his image, Trump has shaped the Republican Party in his image. It didn't look like that after the first term, but it's 100% clear in the beginning of the second term. They try to revert back the Republican Party to its pre-Trump form when Trump left in 2021, and they failed. And it's very clear that the party is forever Trumpian Now we'll see what type of form that takes place or what it looks like, but that's the nature of the Republican Party now. So moving along. We'll go to K-Max. We're gonna finish on Mish House. I like finishing on Mish House. That's always a good one to end on. He says, Scott, this Barry Weiss tweet again comes out and saying we need to call out the far right. That is terrifying. This Nazi-like far right has the same institutional power as the woke left does at the moment, according to Barry Weiss. Let's try to proofread some of our questions before sending them. That was a very confusing sentence. In reality, Scott, is Weiss just a 1990s liberal who wants true neocons on the right as a phony opposition to the 1990s liberal and just the excesses of wokeness to go away? Do many people like this wish it was still the 1990s? Aaron McIntyre tweet as a truth rebuttal to Barry Weiss on this topic. It's funny you bring up Aaron because somebody else has a thing, which it's like Aaron's like saying we can use power, and he's saying she's a creature of the old order and elite who believed 90s liberalism was the end of history, and that is the only sense in which she's a conservative. She wants a world where her and her friends are the elite, the woke is purged, and all the pesky actual right-wingers get shoved back in the corner where they belong. Well, the problem, I don't think that description is accurate of what people like, but what most the base wants is like the 1990s to return. Even a lot of dissident right members are like this, because we'll have like return videos and it's about returning to the Pizza Hut of the 1990s. The 1990s stands as the new 1950s for conservatives of what they want to return to, and they want to return to the 1990s. So this is an accurate feeling among a lot of people. Now, it depends on what that's articulated. Like Barry Weiss is articulating this in a way to be zealously pro-Ukraine, anti-racist, and all this stuff, and also militantly Zionist. She wants all this. Now, the base isn't quite sold on that stuff. But in terms of just returning to 1990s liberalism, yeah, that's what most of the base wants. So the problem is it's where it's articulated. If you're articulating this vision to demand we continue to support Ukraine and a lot of other things the base doesn't care about or opposes, they're not going to be with. But in a lot of ways, what the base wants is they just want wokeness purged, and they want to return to Adam Sandler movies, as I've been meaning. And they're trying to make up this bogeyman of the woke right or whatever, which it's like a very stupid discourse. They, James Lindsay and all these guys just obsess over it all the time. But it's a way to differentiate themselves from the evil extremists. And also another thing, a bad thing, is the Free Press and Barry Weiss's Substack is huge on Substack. It's got a ton of subscribers. And so Barry Weiss is someone who's dunked on by everyone on X, but extremely popular on Substack. So a lot of people like this, but the base is also doesn't give a shit about the woke right. It does not care at all. It is not horrified by it. They're cool with it in a way. There are even some cases open to it. They're not fully with the woke right or what they mean by the dissident right. They're more with the principles of, say, Barry Weiss and what returning to 1990s liberalism. But at the same time, they don't give a shit about the woke right. They really oppose the cancel culture. They're not waking up screaming about this. They do not care. So that's it. Scott, another phenomenon, but maybe we are getting used to it at this point, is American legacy media hating Trump and MAGA so much they openly cheer foreign leaders promising retaliation or any kind of diss on Trump. Did you see when CNN interviewed Chrystia Freeland and basically cheered her on, saying she would punish Americans for Trump tariffs? They also posted with glee that Trudeau taunts Trump after Canada beat the US in the hockey final. Does our legacy media favor party over country? Well, they say they're for country over party, but no, they always do this. I was getting at this with them, cheering on other foreign leaders, are cheering on Zelensky owning America, and Freeland doing that with tariffs. They love this stuff in the late 2010s. They no longer are that keyed on it. Keyed in a different way. They're no longer as keen on it as they were before, because this stuff really strikes Americans. It pisses them off, especially coming from Canada. Like, Americans don't like Canada. They really get I mean, naturally so. It's like, where does Canada get off like lecturing us and trying to say like, oh, we're gonna place tariffs on you, we're gonna punish you. Like, you exist at our behest. Like, I kind of understand like some of the, maybe it gets a little bit too much for Europe, but I'm not gonna have any of that respect for Canada. Like, fuck Canada. Canada sucks. Most Americans are not going to be like, thanks for placing tariffs on us. Thanks for making us spend more at the grocery store. No, all of their anger is going to be not directed towards Trump. It's going to be directed towards Canada, especially with Canada saying this. And like, CNN is not going to be like, oh, thanks for this. They're all operating under 2010's mindset where they could go on and be like, we're going to punish America. America sucks. And it's all due to Trump. And everyone would clap like seals and all that. This is a completely different time period. And with CNN, or with Canada rather, they're not going to do well by maintaining this attitude. So, yeah, it's more of a late 2010s thing than a 2024 thing. We've got a question from Raven. Raven says, there's now a strict prohibition against ranking the races. Am I allowed to ask you which NFL team you consider the blackest for any reason, and which one is the whitest also for any reason? For me, I would say the blackest: Raiders, Cowboys, Falcons, or Ravens, and for whitest, Green Bay or Jets. I don't know why you would say the Jets, but maybe for their fan base. Well, there's different categories. One, it's like their fan base. Most teams actually have a pretty white working class fan base. It's rare. Some of them have Hispanic fan bases. Some do just by having a very black city, like Baltimore, have a black fan base. Then it's like the team vibe. Have they always had like a very black vibe to them? Have they, like the Ravens? So I think I know who I'm going to say the blackest team is. There's also the fact if they have a black coach or a black starting quarterback, that can affect it. Like the Green Bay Packers now have a black starting quarterback. So that probably limits them being the whitest team. And so that can change over time of like who's starting or their vibe. But for most of my lifetime, and also the fact that they're a black majority city, Baltimore Ravens would be the blackest. I think historically it would be the Raiders. And if you went into the 80s, it would definitely be the Raiders. But the Raiders, and this is a lot of the demographic shifts that were going on in California at the time, they began having a much more of a Hispanic fan base. Also, their team, and especially with now they're in Las Vegas, they're much more of a Hispanic team than a black team. I think there is still some historic loyalty towards blacks, towards the Raiders, because, I mean, all these gangster rappers in the 80s and 90s love the Raiders. They loved Raiders gear. They had a very black vibe. They were with the Miami Hurricanes of being a very black team and vibe and how they, and fan base. But that's changed over time. I mean, I don't think the Hurricanes would be the blackest college football team. I mean, historically, they still had that vibe, but I don't think that would be the case anymore. It'd be tough to say with the black, because, I mean, college football is very white, like fan base and very white aesthetics. It still actually could still be Miami, but Miami's just not as big as it used to be. In the 2000s, it still had that very black vibe to it, but for blackest, I would say Ravens. Cowboys, it's situated in, it has a white suburban fan base, even though there are a lot of blacks who like the Cowboys. It's because they're just one of those teams. They're like the Yankees that have a national fan base. And a lot of blacks nationwide like them because they're just the good team. They had a very black vibe in the 90s when they were really good. I hated the Cowboys for that. I mean, they had all these players who were always getting arrested and stuff. And so you would probably say, yeah, they would have been that for the 90s. But the fact that they have a conservative suburban fan base, that's their primary fan base. I would say no. I would say Ravens. Now, whitest is a tricky fan base. It probably would be the Green Bay Packers. I don't know if there is. I have to look. I don't think Green Bay has a very high black percentage population. It's all these Wisconsinites who are rooting for them. It's extremely cold. Black players have always hated playing for Green Bay of how cold it is. Historically, you'd probably say one of those Midwestern teams. And if you base it on fan base, probably would be them. But then there's a lot of teams but it also depends on just their vibe and like and player demographics. I think the widest team right now is the Lions, which is funny because they're in Detroit, which but I think most of their fan base. I don't think the locals in Detroit are in it. It's mostly the suburbs and the old white working class that are still around who are really into the Lions. Um, but I would have to say, I mean, blacks are not into the Packers. So by vibe, by fan base, you would probably have to pick the Packers. I would have to. I could think about it more. The Patriot actually. Well, when they had their black coach, who was like very like, we're definitely gonna be a black. We're gonna be for more diversity. I would say it's the Patriots. Patriots would also have an extremely white fan base, and they had a very white team. If you had asked me this question, even after Tom Brady had left and Bill Belichick was there, I would say the Patriots. But I still think that reputation that they garnered in the 2000s and 2010s, and they have an extremely white fan base by being New England. It's only the white working class guys who are rooting for, and the middle class whites who are rooting for them. Boston area. So I would probably, and they have a white quarterback now. So due to the fact that the Green Bay Packers have a black quarterback, I cannot pick them. And they fired their black coach, so I've been hesitant to say that, but I would give it to the Patriots. I would say that they're the whitest team, and just vibe, fan base, and what they convey. So that would be it. So blackest Ravens, whitest Patriots. I would be content with that. I mean, you could even go with other teams like the Seahawks, but I don't, they just don't really register. It's like a very white, the Pacific Northwest. It's like its own identity. So I would have to go with and generally they won the Super Bowls with a black quarterback. So, and they had Sherman, who was also going off about his black identity. Oh, I'm trying to remember his first name. Richard Sherman, that's it, and he's now an NFL commentator. Tom Brady's gonna be forever associated with the Patriots, and I know he did the cringe anti-racist ad, but he's gonna be. People hate him because he's too damn white. He was just almost a caricature of a white guy, and the Patriots fan base is extremely white. So I would say the Patriots and blackest Ravens. Sorry, Raven, for saying that your team is the blackest, even though I don't think Raven is a Ravens fan. Now we're gonna go to Werner. Hey Scott, what do you think the antidote to the nonstop simping for women is on the right? Whether it's the dissident right or normie boomer cons, they can't stop slobbering over supposed base e-girls and or their wives. Why do you think this is, and do you think that there will be some Andrew Tate tier backlash against it in the future as the competition and animosity between the sexes get worse? I think it's just a matter of old guys having more of an influence, and they're very much. It's a sphere where being married is seen as an accomplishment rather than just a normal thing to do, because there's a lot of autistic and people who struggle to get married, and they feel this gives them self-worth, so they're demanding that they have that higher status. They want to be treated like they deserve a Medal of Honor and aristocracy for being married. And older guys are just going to simp for the younger women in a way that the younger guys are not. Especially if they're married. If they're married, they're going to be like these 23-year-olds. It's like, I can't find a good man. And they're like, oh, this is because of men. And also a lot of these older guys have just they don't have misogyny. They have absolute hatred for young guys. And that turns into simping for the women. I think it's just like, really got to knock down the no wife guy radicalism like fantasy. Because once you knock that down and people stop wanting to treat family formation as a good normal thing, and instead of treating it like it deserves a Medal of Honor and that you are like an aristocrat and we have to bow before you, once we stop like elevating it to that unearned status, it would diminish the simping, because the wife guy radicalism encourages simping for these older women, because it encourages hatred for the unmarried guys, not hatred for the unmarried women, and encouragement of their ridiculous ideas and other things. I think that's it. And I think it's The Zoomers have their own problems, but it's more. So I don't want to say it's like the Zoomers completely displace everyone else. I mean, we got to be pro Zoomers, but it's a lot of what goes on X is just guys who are now in their 30s and 40s pretending to still be young. A lot of the ones who are most guilty of this are the ones who are they're like, I'm spiritually young, and then they're like got wife and kids, and they spend most of their time taking their kids to t-ball and stuff. It's like, I don't know what's spiritually young about you. I mean, maybe you're working out, but that's like middle age stuff. I mean, it's good. That's a part of aging. I don't know why you need to stay like young. There was like this post of this guy who was like saying, "Oh, Stephen Miller spiritually sensitive young man," because I pointed out like Stephen Miller's almost 40, and he's like spiritually he's a sensitive young man, and it has him like a family picture. It's like, no, this is spiritually middle age. That's fine. It's okay to be middle age. Like, but the problem is more when middle aged people try to present themselves as young. I mean, we're all gonna be middle aged at some point. I'm gonna be middle aged. Some people might even think I'm middle aged by now. I probably disagree with them, but I'm getting close to it, and we're all gonna get old. You just have to accept that. I don't, but I think it is part of the kind of wife guyism. Once you displace that, I think the simping will diminish, or I'm hoping it will. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe it won't. Maybe we're gonna be stuck with this for a long time. So that is the question from Werner. I think we're ending. I just had to get one comment from Renaud. He said he admitted that I was right. He said it wasn't Mitch McConnell who won in a renown. I say renown, a renown. Sorry, renown. It wasn't Mitch McConnell who won power of the November elections. It was indeed Donald Trump. All kidding aside, it's shocking to me. Tulsi and Kash Patel got confirmed. It seemed pretty easy for Mitch to stop them in the Senate, but he couldn't do it. Well, he didn't stop it because he's no longer Senate leader, and he's very old and frail, and he doesn't have the same power he once did. And he just did these as protest votes against certain ones because he feels free to do so. So that's his opinion. We've got Stealth Bomber. He said, I totally agree about the importance of marrying within your own race, but given how unpopular this view is in real life, do you think it's even worth bringing up in everyday conversation? If it's difficult to persuade even members of the online right, it raises the question of whether convincing normies is even possible. In my experience, even many conservatives push back on this issue, often taking it personally, especially if they're already in a mixed relationship. It's an even greater challenge since non-white women are more willing to simp for their white men than white women are, at least before marriage. This can make it nearly impossible to get someone to see the bigger picture and consider the long-term consequences, especially if they struggle with white women in the past. Is there a productive way to discuss it without instantly alienating people, or is it more of a private conviction best kept within our own circles? I think with your friends you should bring it up, especially if they're why you should probably bring it up in a subtle way, being like, oh, Asian women can control you, or Hispanic women are going to age poorly. I think it's like those subtle ways of just saying it, not like, like you got to marry within your race. You got to bring it subtly to like, hey, you should make your distaste known, but like on a subtle level if they're dating this stuff. You should bring up in this conversation about how Asians are going to be more controlling of their men than even white women are, and Hispanic women are not going to age as well as white women. And I think that's the real key to bring up on just like all these other matters. That's how you'd bring it up. I think it is probably a private conviction. It really does have to just be a social taboo enforced by families, which even liberal families in the 70s and 80s, if you brought home like a non-white, they'd be like, what are you doing? Well, now conservatives are like, based. Ooh, these are two American conservatives waging war against the woke. Let's go. I mean, there's not even that. The social taboo has to be reinforced, but it has to be done in a subtle manner because, you should worry about your political beliefs. There's certain convictions. If somebody is going to be like, you're not going to be my friend if you voted for Trump, then that person's not going to be your friend. But there is things where you could potentially alienate them if they're doing this. But I think if they are if personal friends or family members are considering marrying or dating non-white women, you should bring up the problems with that. But not in a way about like on things that they would get. Not on like ways like, oh, you gotta think about your race and stuff. They're gonna think that you're like talking to them about space aliens. So there is that matter. They have to deal with. But it is like true. I mean, even the distant right doesn't take this shit seriously. Like the people who are most likely to condemn it online are also more likely to engage in it than the people who don't even think about it. Well, I don't know if more likely, but they are almost as likely to engage in it as like the people who don't think about it. Because the people who are really not engaged in it are it's all comes down to who is a social circle. And so if you are a normal middle class guy who goes to the flagship state university, you increase your chances of marrying another person, marrying another white person. Because that's who's around your social circle. People even will think it weird if you bring like an Asian, they're like, oh, you're nerdy, couldn't get a white woman. Or if you bring like a Hispanic, you're like, did she go to college? Like, no. Does she speak English? Sort of. It's, you have those things. If you went to a college and that's like your social circle and social class, you're going to be surrounded by generally other white people. This is different in California, with exceptions in California and, probably a few other states. But for the most part, that's how it is in the Midwest and the Southeast and, probably, and certainly the Pacific Northwest. But with the real increases happen when you don't go to college, because an overlooked factor is how much the white working class is marrying with Hispanics. This is a topic for another day, but it is very, very high. They're also the most likely to date and have children with blacks as well. Far more likely than the middle class. So that's increasing at the lower end. And then at the elite level, you increase your chance. If you're going to an elite college, you're going to be surrounded by Asians, and that increases your chance. And those are going to be in your social circle out of college. You increase your chances of marrying Asians. So it's really the middle class who's thinking about this. And generally, the normies aren't really thinking about these matters. They're thinking about sports and other things. But they're the most likely to not even have to worry about this. But it might be changing. I do think it is changing a little bit within the middle class. But that is a topic for another day. We're going to finish up with Mish House. Mish House has got two questions. He's like, do you think the R.M. McIntyre right is dying out? Clearly not if people are sending R.M. McIntyre questions to it. I don't know quite what the R.M. McIntyre right means, but thankfully my X feed has far fewer instances of thinking we need to reverse the Enlightenment or some shit to be racist and sexist. Well, clearly no, it's very popular, as you can see by the question or the rebuttal to Barry Weiss. I just think it depends on your feed. I'm not quite sure what the R.M. McIntyre right means. We're fine with R.M. McIntyre, so I can't say I agree with everything he tweets, but I don't know quite what that means. But I guess it's if you mean people are like, we need to reverse the Enlightenment or overturn it. Yes, I do think that take is definitely losing momentum, especially with what's happening with the Trump admin. The Trump admin does not have an executive order rescinding the Enlightenment. So I do think that there is less of that going on. His second question, I watched the movie Duel, 1971, recently, in which a mild-mannered middle-class man is relentlessly terrorized by an unseen trucker after passing him on the highway. I couldn't help but think of the conservative proletarianism that's been subject you've spoken often about recently while watching it. If you were an unlicensed doctor, would you give me schizo pills for thinking like this? Not at all, because it's actually a common theme in a lot of movies where middle-class whites have unfortunate interactions with the working class. Last House on the Left is an example, not a blockbuster film, but in the original, it's the nice white middle-class family. They send their daughter their daughter goes off to a rock concert, and she's abducted, raped, and murdered by white criminals, the white trash. And calling them white working class is a little too generous. They are white trash. And they do this before getting into the city. So if they had made it to the city, it would have. I forget. I haven't seen it in years. I think they do it like on the way to the city. If it's on the city, they clearly got the race wrong. But it's like out in their area. And then later, the white trash go to the father's house with the white middle class, and they see the different manners and the uncouth and boorishness of them. And eventually he realizes they murdered his daughter. and he brutally murders them. And it's a way like the mild mannered middle class guy takes his vengeance on the white trash who are more violent than them. Also, Deliverance, also a case of mild mannered middle class coming into conflict with rural whites. Now we would be like, oh man, that's base. The rural whites are raping. But like the conservative proletarianism, it's a very common theme in movies. You could say like this is Hollywood pitting them, but the reason why they did this is that it's like white middle class anxieties about dealing with white trash. Not quite white working class. I think it's the elements they deal with are like the criminal class or like real backwoods types that you don't really quite deal with the working class. But that was always a thing. But now like these movies would be seen as like the villains would be awesome and we need to be more like them. But it was a common theme in the 70s. It carried on into the 90s. I'd have to think of there was one movie where it was also dealing with trucks. I can't remember. It's in the 90s. I'm going to remember this movie at some point. But it's like a middle class couple, and the wife gets abducted by like truckers, and like he goes insane. Like he's like, my wife is missing. They're like, no, she's not. I forget the name of the movie. I will find it eventually, but I don't think you're on schizo pills for this. When I see these movies now, I'm like, now I relate it to takes I have. So no, you're totally fine, Michels, for thinking like this. I'm glad you're thinking of my takes while watching movies. But anyway, that is it for Highly Respected today. We're going to have more great content coming up this week, so be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.